Jesus and His glory, of Jesus and His love. I love to tell the story because I know it is true. It satisfies my longing as nothing else can do. I love to tell the story, will be my theme and glory, to tell the old story of Jesus and His love. I love to tell the story, more wonderful it seems than all the golden fancies of all my golden dreams. I love to tell the story, it is so much for me, and that is just the reason I tell it now to thee. I love to tell the story, will be my theme and glory, to tell the old story of Jesus and His love. I love to tell the story, 'tis pleasant to repeat what seems each time I tell it more wonderfully sweet. I love to tell the story, for some have never heard the message of salvation from God's own holy word. I love to tell the story, will be my theme and glory, to tell the old story of Jesus and His love. I love to tell the story for those who know it best. Sing hungering and thirsting to hear it like a rest, and when in scenes of glory I sing the new song, will be the old story that I have loved so long. I love to tell the story, will be my theme and glory, to tell the old story of Jesus and His love. Page 742, 742. When upon my pillow you are tempest tossed, when you are discouraged, thinking all is lost, and through many blessings name them one by one, and it will surprise you what the Lord has done. Count your blessings, name them one by one. Count your blessings, see what God hath done. Count your blessings, name Are you ever burdened with the load of care? Does your crossing heavy you are called to bear? Count your many blessings, every doubt will fly, and you will be singing as the days go by. Count your blessings, name them one by one. Count your blessings, see what God has done. Count your blessings, name them one by one. Count your many blessings, see what God has done. So amid the conflict, whether great or small, do not be discouraged, God is over all. Count your many blessings, angels will attend, helping comfort give you to your journey's end. Count your blessings, angels one by one. Count your blessings, see what God has done. Count your blessings, name them one by one. Count your many blessings, see what God has done.
Psalm for lesson, page 678. 678.
More about Jesus would I know, more of His grace to others show, more of His saving fullness see, more of His love to die for me. More about Jesus, more about Jesus, more of His saving fullness see, more of His love to die for me. More about Jesus, let me learn, more of His holy will discern. Spirit of God, my teacher be, showing the things Christ to me. More about Jesus, more about Jesus, more of His saving fullness see, more of His love to die for me. More about Jesus in His word, holding communion with my Lord, hearing His voice in every line, making each faithful saying mine. More about Jesus, more about Jesus, more of His saving fullness see, more of His love to die for me. More about Jesus on His throne, riches and glory all His own. More of His kingdom sure increase, more of His coming Prince of Peace. More about Jesus, more about Jesus, more of His saving fullness see, more of His love to die for me.
Please mark your songbooks, page 940, will be the song of invitation for the lesson. 940.
Y'all see the question? Okay, here's the one thing you can't apply to it. Romans 3:23. all the sins gone short of the glory of God, because that's not what we're talking about. It is no doubt that sometime in his lifetime, Abraham sinned. Just as all men sin. But we're going to look at a particular instance. Actually, two instances. And sometimes it becomes great controversy. And I'm going to tell you right now, you're not getting a yes or a no out of me.
Right on fence,
I'm
gonna sit on the fence.
going to sit right on the fence. I'm going to give you that. And I'm going to ask you some things that no matter which side you fall on, are going to make you question it. And that's why I'm on the fence. Look at Genesis 12, 10 through 13. Now there was a famine in the land, and Abram went down to Egypt to dwell there, for the famine was severe in the land. And it came to pass when he was close to entering Egypt that he said to Sarai his wife, "Indeed, I know that you are a woman of beautiful countenance. Therefore it will happen when the Egyptians see you that they will say, 'This is his wife.' And they will kill me, but they will let you live. Please say you are my sister, that it may be well with me for your sake, that I may live because of you." Now, when we look at this first one, keep in mind what we know at this first one. Okay? Because that's important. The question first I had, did he refuse to answer? See, because we know what happened. We'll go on in verses 14, 20. So it was when Abraham came into Egypt that the Egyptians saw the woman, that she was very beautiful. The princes of Pharaoh also saw her and commended her to Pharaoh. And the woman was taken to Pharaoh's house. He treated Abram well for her sake. He had sheep, oxen, male donkeys, male and female servants, female donkeys, and camels. What's the implication there? He got a lot of presents. Abraham, huh? That was a dowry. Notice, but the Lord plagued Pharaoh and his house with great plagues because of Sarai, Abram's wife. And Pharaoh called Abram and said, "What is this that you've done to me? Why did you not tell me that she was your wife? Why did you say she's my sister? I'm not going to take her as my wife. Now therefore, here's your wife. Take her and go your way." So Pharaoh commanded his men concerning him, and they sent him away with his wife and all they had. Now, this is all we know at this time. Did he ever ask Abram, "Is this your wife?" See, the conclusion that we often reach is that Abram lied. Did he lie?
He was being deceptive. He referred to her.
He was being a deceptive. Okay? So if he's being deceptive, is that simple?
Does he go around?
Well, let me ask you this question. This answer, no. That's a simple question. It's a yes or no. Is being deceptive?
Yes.
Simple.
Wasn't she also
Hold on, we don't know that yet. I said we're going to take this one in the context of where we know. Pardon now?
I said he's an accessory to the crime, and in today's society, an accessory to a crime, you can be arrested, so there.
Accessory to the crime. We've got a lawyer back there in the back. Ron.
God's the judge of whether something is a sin or not, and he didn't explain it to us, so we don't know.
See, Ron's getting on the fence with me. And that's a good point, Ron. Here's the question go ahead, Joey. All right.
Well, looking at what he told her to say, under the assumption she said it, so then she was taken to Pharaoh. So he has caused her to sin, therefore he's
Okay, so you're with Martha, he's an accessory.
I believe deceitfulness is always a sin, and the reason I do is because for all intents and purposes, it's a lie.
Okay, and deceitfulness is always a sin, and it's a lie. That's what Brother Elton said. Okay, here's my question. Are we taught that it's wrong to profit from your sin? Ray?
Well, I know you just said that, maybe if the sin is wrong, and you profit from that, but then you profit from wrong, and that, to me, would be a sin. I can't quote.
So now we go back here. He treated Abram well for her sake. He had sheep, oxen, male donkeys, male and female servants, female donkeys and camels. And where did the Lord say, give them back? And I'll be the first to say it's wrong profit from sin. Okay?
But the Lord did that to move you on.
Well, and I'm not saying whether it was sinful or not, because we got a lot of questions here. Here's the big deal. Do you tell everything you know? Do you have to tell everything you know?
So to keep
Because that's the kind of the thought, huh?
To keep things, some people believe, or they don't believe, they'll say, well, I'll just tell part, I didn't lie because I told the truth, I just didn't tell the whole truth, so does that make it right or wrong?
Well, well, yeah, I mean, huh?
I would say, of course, it wasn't a lie, but he said he was his sister because she was his half sister.
Right, that's further in the context right now. But, and it is important, I guess we should tie that in, Teresa brought it up. It wasn't, that part was not a lie.
All it really shows is that more than just Abraham suffers from the sin. And not necessarily Abram himself, but the consequences of the sin fall on more people.
Isn't it interesting? Now, I want to point this out. Isn't it interesting that the ones that really received the punishment was Pharaoh and his people?
Which makes it look like God did not consider it a sin upon Sarah and
He did consider it a sin that if Pharaoh took her to be his wife,
or he just was getting his attention.
or getting his attention, what have you. That part we know. Here's the problem we got into. Ron made a good point. Now, wait a minute. What did you say? What were you going to say?
Oh, what was I gonna say? Yeah, Romans 5:13 says, for sin indeed was in the world before the law was given, but sin is not counted where there is no law.
Yeah.
Since sin is a judgment call, God has to say whether it's a sin or not. And
that's what you said before. God has said, I'm not a sinner.
That's why I'm on that fence like that. Because
Yeah.
it doesn't state there whether, we know that sin was in the world, but we don't know what the rules were. So we don't
Well,
know.
it obviously was wrong for Pharaoh to consider taking Abram's wife as his own. That much we know.
Yeah, because God calls him into judgment on that.
Right.
It's true, it appears that Abraham left with some possessions he didn't come with. But he also left with a sullied name. What's the cost?
Oh, yeah. And that's the thing. He hurt himself as far as Egypt was concerned.
He might have had an extra camel or two, but his name was less.
Yes, and that much we know. Now, here's the question. Why did Abraham tell Sarah to say, you're my sister?
Fear,
He didn't want to be killed.
But he didn't want to kill.
fear.
Fear. Notice what Proverbs 29:25 says. The fear of man brings a snare, but whoever trusts in the Lord shall be saved. You think that God's given us a glimpse that Pharaoh, or that Abraham's faith wasn't what it was, as we often think. We kind of get to that point and we think when God called Abraham, his faith was already full grown. You said what?
He was being cultivated.
He's being cultivated. His faith had to grow. Faith is part of that is trust. Now here's the question for those that might say, and we're going to get there a little bit more too. To admit something, is that a sin? I got a preacher friend who is a professor of law at what used to be called Faulkner, that used to be a federal district attorney, used to have a private practice, and questioned one day when he was in private practice as an attorney, and he's a preacher too. And this one, when in private practice, when he had somebody that he just was looking across for and he knew they were guilty, his deal was, would always tell him, you have the right to keep silent. I am not going to do anything that would say that you're not guilty. Also, I'm not going to say you are guilty. You're going to keep silent. We're going to make the prosecution prove their case. Did he lie? Did he ever lie? Before you say yes or no, know that secret things belong to the Lord our God, but those things which are revealed belong to us and to our children forever, that we may do all the words of his law. Are there things that God doesn't tell us that he could tell us? And that we could understand? Because that's often what we say is, what he doesn't reveal, we couldn't understand. Could he have given us the exact day of Jesus' birth? Could he tell us the exact day that the earth is going to end? Or the day of our death? So to say, to admit something that you could tell is deceptive, then you're calling God deceptive. I told you I was going to make you question some things.
I share you, I don't think that.
For most of us,
Here, huh?
for most of us, getting up and saying, this person pleads innocent, when we know that person is guilty, means we're representing a bald-faced liar.
We are.
So for most of
Look,
us.
I'm not getting in what Melvin
We
does.
just brought it up.
I know I brought up, I said, this is what Melvin does. But when I'm talking, we're talking about Abraham. Here's our question, because our first thought is, it's a lie of omission.
But to me, that's apple and orange. You're talking physical versus spiritual, and God's always right.
We know God's always right. But that is not apple. Let me ask you this. How much you weigh? What business is that of mine? None.
But if she lies about it.
If she lies about it, but does she have to answer the question?
But you don't have a.
But here's the thing. What was Abraham asked?
But she
What?
was his sister.
And I understand that. So the question is, was he ever asked, is this your wife?
We don't know.
Huh?
We don't know.
We don't know.
We don't know.
If by withholding information you allow someone to believe a lie, then it's wrong.
Okay, that's her thing.
Maybe you went in there with that deception. You told her.
Or withholding information that leads to sin.
Okay.
Withholding your weight doesn't lead to sin.
Okay, but the point we tend to say is that here, huh? Let me ask you this. Did the information he gave Pharaoh cause Pharaoh to sin? Because you brought that up.
The information he didn't give did.
Okay, let me ask this question. What if Abraham was right? What if he had told them there's his wife, they would have killed him?
He would
Would
not
there still
sin.
been sin?
No, if he
Well,
told.
Pharaoh,
The
yeah.
murder would have been sin.
But Abram wouldn't have.
Yeah, but it would have been his fault. that wouldn't have been his fault.
But okay, now let's go back to Ron's question. Where does God say he sinned?
Where does he say murder's a sin before Cain killed Abel?
Somewhere that was told, somewhere we know because it condemned Cain. Okay, but my point is, in this situation, now look, y'all getting my point. Y'all think I'm arguing that it wasn't sinful. I'm not arguing either way. I'm just trying to get us to think.
No, he didn't have the law yet, but God talked to him, because he told him to leave.
Well, there was always a moral law. We know that.
Did Pharaoh have relations with Sarah?
From what we know, no. Now, was he planning to? Probably.
Well,
That's why God intervened.
was angry with it. He said, you could have made me.
Right, you could have made me take her as wife. He's there. He's angry with Abraham. Now, I agree with Joey. Abraham hurt his reputation. He hurt his name.
I think he lost.
I think he lost.
Well, Pharaoh could have killed him for lying to him.
Pharaoh could have killed him for lying to him. God, they're, in the whole situation, let's understand this. God was watching over Abraham. The question we get into is we sometimes want to put out things that we don't ever think about.
Well, it kind of fell on both sides of that problem. Let's go back that one slide. It kind of fell on both sides of that. He trusted God, but his fear brought him a snare.
It did. His fear brought him into a snare. There's no doubt.
He also compromised Sarah's
Yeah, and he compromised Sarah's integrity. Now, there's a good point that
You got Proverbs 22:1 to consider.
read it.
A good name is to be chosen rather than great riches.
Good name. Well, yeah. Rather than great riches.
He got great riches and a bad name when he walked out of there.
Yeah. Yeah. And it's interesting, he never goes to Egypt again.
Yeah, but he didn't go into it to get great riches. He just went in to save his life.
Yeah, his intent was saving his life, and that's true. So there's a lot of things we have to consider. And I think God wants us to consider all these things rather than just take the quick, easy way and say, well, he lied.
That slide right there is a good slide. The secret things belong to God.
Yeah, and him not revealing them is not lying.
Any way you cut it, Abraham had some wrong, done some wrong, fostered some wrong. I don't know how you put it, but he was wrong.
Ray's pretty adamant. He fostered wrong, he did some wrong, and he was wrong. Okay? Now, so here's the thing that we need to consider. Do we have to answer every question?
Only to God.
Huh?
Only to God.
Only to God. Okay? So,
And your wife, if you want to stay in the house and not in the garage.
yeah, well, you know what? There's a lesson we learned from Abraham on that. Abraham told what he had to tell. Right? And that's what you just said. You tell what you have to tell. What the rooftop's for? It is a better marriage if you answer on both sides what needs to be answered. There's a big question. All right, so we go back to Abraham. Genesis chapter 20, verse 1 through 7. And Abraham journeyed from there to the south and dwelt between Kadesh and Shur and stayed in Gerar. Now Abraham said of Sarah his wife, she is my sister. And Amalek king of Gerar sent and took Sarah. Okay, here's an interesting point. How many years have passed? Oh, you.
Well, a few, because Isaac hadn't been, sacrificed at the altar yet. So,
Hadn't been born yet.
so his name was not changed at that point, from Abram to Abraham.
And the first time, not long after they left. Not long after Terah died. In fact, when you open it back up, Lot is still with it. Okay? Genesis chapter 19 is when God tells Abram about a year from now, you'll have a son, and Sarah laughs. And that's when it tells that he's 99. So honestly, about the time he goes to Egypt the first time, he's somewhere around 70 to 75 years old. So we have a passage of around 24 to 30 years. And we got the same thing going on. But God came to Abimelech in a dream by night and said to him, indeed, you are a dead man because of the woman whom you have taken, for she is a man's wife. Let me ask this question. Can God use evil to work good? But does he endorse evil when he does that? No.
Jesus on the cross.
Jesus on the cross. He didn't endorse what he did, but he used it. Okay?
Amos 3:6 says, where there's evil in the city, I cause it.
Where there's evil in the city, I caused it.
Calamity. Don't make calamity.
Calamity. I allowed it. I brought it about. I let the devil do his thing. If you go and look, if you don't understand anything else about the book of Job, understand that sometimes God takes the devil off the leash. Because he'll know good will come from him. Okay? Now, notice, indeed you are a dead man, the woman whom you have taken, for she is a man's wife. Talk about law. There was a morality law that was in effect. We knew that a man's wife could not be taken by another man. And that goes all, that's in effect all the way back to Pharaoh. Because that's the problem with Pharaoh. But Abimelech had not come near her, and he said, Lord, will you slay a righteous nation also? Did he not say to me, she is my sister? And even she herself said, he is my brother. In the integrity of my heart and innocence of my hands, I have done this. What are you saying? I'm innocent of this because I didn't know. She said he's my brother. She said he's my sister. Or vice versa. Abimelech says, I was lied to. Or he's saying, I wasn't told that they were husband and wife. And God said to him in a dream, yes, I know that you did this in the integrity of your heart, for I also withheld you from sinning against me, therefore I did not let you touch her. I'm here telling you this so that you don't sin by being with her. Now therefore, notice this one. This is one that always bugs me. Restore the man's wife, for he is a prophet, and he will pray for you, and you shall live. But if you do not restore her, know that you shall surely die, you and all who are yours. Give the man back his wife, and have him pray for you.
Most interesting is that, or I also withheld you from sin.
Well, that's the point, but that point is that God is saying, I'm coming to you in this dream to keep you from taking her to your wife. No, you haven't done it yet, but you will if I allow the situation to continue. And that point they does, sometimes we don't realize things that God does to keep us from sinning. But now, here in this context of what we're discussing, this one that we often say is the cause of all the sin is told to pray for the ones that were about to sin because of what he did.
That's Abraham, the good guy.
That's the question, is he a good guy? Or is he just in a better relationship with God? Now, notice something else. So Abimelech rose early in the morning, called all the servants, and told all these things in their hearing, and the men are very much afraid. And Abimelech called Abraham and said to him, "What have you done to us? How have I offended you that have you brought on me and on my kingdom a great sin? You have done deeds to me that ought not to be done." Talk about sullying your name. You're the result of you're the reason we have all the calamity that is going on. Then Abimelech said to Abraham, "What did you have in view that you have done this thing? What were you thinking?" And Abraham said, "Because I thought surely the fear of God is not in this place, and they will kill me on account of my wife." So here's that fear again. Lack of trust. "But indeed, she is truly my sister. She is the daughter of my father, but not the daughter of my mother, and she became my wife."
Interesting. He only uses her, or refers to her as his sister when it's convenient. Other than that, it's his father.
A lot of convenience now. Let me ask this question. Consider the context of the time. How common would it be for a man to have his sister as a wife?
Probably more common than we think, because they multiply the land.
We're not that many years from Noah. So, in fact, if you really get into it historical, from what we understand, it was a very common thing. And it didn't end there. In fact, you get down to David and Tamar, a half-sister of, somebody help me out here, the one that took her. She told him, "Ask our father to give me to you as wife." Okay? Now, look at it as, but it wasn't that uncommon at that time. Now, so what Abraham said, "I didn't lie, I told you a truth. But I tell you the whole truth." Well, then the question comes back this. Did they ask the right questions?
Now we're back to the court case.
Yeah.
Well, we're back in the court case. Did they ask the right questions?
Did they even ask? Or did he just introduce her?
And that, huh? Well, here's the question, okay? You're in a court case, and they ask you, "Where were you this particular night?" And you say, "Well, I was at work." Well, they generally ask you,
Can you prove it?
"Can you prove it and what time?" If they don't ask you, what's the jury thinking? You're at work during the time frame that they're questioning because they didn't ask. Ron?
This may be where the philosophers came up with this question, that you can't do a good thing with bad intentions, but you can do a bad thing with good intentions.
That's a truth.
And Jesus used that example when he said, when they were accusing the disciples of picking corn or wheat when they were walking through the field on the Sabbath day, And he said, don't you remember what David did? He went in when he was hungry. Him and his men were hungry and ate the holy bread, which is not allowed. And the priests work on every single Sabbath, and they're held guiltless. So there are exceptions that God makes throughout time, but that's not for us to judge.
Here's the thing that I've always tried to get across with those exceptions, and then Ron's going right down the path with me. We don't get to make the exceptions the rule. Only God does. Okay? So what took place here, and why we're considered is how we react in our own lives. Okay? Because we're trying to live, or should be trying to live lives pleasing God. Now notice as it said, let me finish what Abraham had to say. And it came to pass when God caused me to wander from my father's house that I said to her, this is your kindness that you should do for me. In every place, wherever he goes, say of me, he is my brother. So this was determined long before they even went to Egypt. Now notice this. Now here comes that prophet again. Then Abraham took sheep, oxen, male and female servants, and Abimelech, and gave them to Abraham, and he restored Sarah his wife to him. Okay? And said, see, my land is before you, dwell where it pleases you. I want to stop and I want you to think about that real quick. Abraham, when he went into the land of Gerar, was afraid. And probably with good reason. Because he's a stranger in the land. Yes, perhaps he's trying to, but may very well seem that he had seen the things that he was afraid of. He probably had seen people kill people for their life. But now this puts it in a position where Abimelech knows God is with him. And now he's safe in the land.
And Abraham said there's no fear of God in this place when he came there, but there was definitely a fear of God in that place when he left it.
There you go. Now, notice this. Then to Sarah he said, this is interesting to me. Then to Sarah he said, behold, I've given your brother 1,000 pieces of silver. Indeed, this vindicates you before all who are with you and before everybody. Thus she was rebuked. Now notice, what did he call Sarah? Abraham to Sarah? Your brother. Yeah, he's your brother. And this vindicates you before all who are with you and before everybody. In other words, I have restored you. You're now free. You're free. You're free to go back to your husband. But notice what it said. Thus she was rebuked. Thought long and hard over this many years. I think what happened here, now this is Hal's speculation. Okay? I'm not even going to say it's a reasonable conclusion. It's my speculation. Abraham was asked, what's your relationship to her? He said, she's my sister. As things progressed, Sarah was asked, what is your relationship to him? She said, he's my brother. Is he your husband? No.
Where did you get that?
Huh? From that being rebuked. Now, what did I say? What did I say? What did I call this?
Your opinion.
No, I didn't call it that. Speculation. It's not even necessarily a reasonable conclusion. It's just the only one I've come up with. Okay? I got no groundwork to prove it. Okay? So don't ask me to prove it. I said, this is my speculation. Because I can't prove it. I can't prove it yea or nay. I can't prove whether or not Abraham was asked, is she your wife? Because nowhere does it say. But notice this. So Abraham prayed to God. God healed Abimelech, his wife, and his female servants. Then they bore children, for God, the Lord had closed up all the wombs of the house of Abimelech because of Sarah, Abraham's wife. How long did Abimelech have her in his household?
Must have been for some time, when you paid her, of course, Abraham got a lot of money, so.
But for to know that these women were unable to bear children, I mean, we're talking at least a month or two, right? Or more. We know something. Here's the question, do we? There are things we ought to answer, but there are things we don't necessarily have to answer, because what we generally do is take this and say we must, any question asked to us, we must answer or we're lying. That's what people have turned it into. Now I want you to have this example. Matthew 21:23-27. And when he, Jesus, came into the temple, the chief priests, the elders of the people confronted him as he was. Are you doing these things, and who gave you this authority? Is that an unreasonable question? He just driven the money changers out the day before. Not an unreasonable question, is it? But Jesus answered and said to them, I also will ask you one thing, which if you tell me, I likewise will tell you by what authority I do these things. The baptism of John, where was it from? From heaven or from men? And they reasoned among themselves, saying, if we say from heaven, he will say to us, why then did you not believe him? But if we say from men, we fear the multitude, for all count John as a prophet. So they answered Jesus and said, we do not know. And he said to them, neither will I tell you by what authority I do these things. We don't have to answer every question. But there's definitely questions we can't choose to omit.
Going back to Abraham.
We're done with Abraham. You reconcile it however you want. Okay? I'm not giving you a yay or nay, one way or another. I know that from the beginning.
I'm going to mention something about his attitude. He was always an obedient man who did what God told him to do. He always trusted that God would provide. And possibly he believed that God gave him a really good answer. He was a woman that was his sister.
Any of those things are possible, but now we're moving on.
That's fine.
I got two things to look at. I got to look at what we got left, and I got to look at that clock. Because y'all don't want to turn this into a midnight sermon. What? The Lord?
No, I'm gonna say something.
Oh, say something then. Well, you're pointing.
Well, I'll raise my hand.
Okay.
Or, that all brings me back to something I heard years ago. Ask no question, nothing. Ask me no question, I'll tell you what.
That's a song.
In all of this,
And some people, you need to establish that rule that, you know what, there's no point in asking no questions because whatever the answer will be a lie.
Moral responsibility isn't canceled because of the circumstances we're in.
This is what we're getting into.
Right.
Okay. Dwayne said moral responsibility isn't canceled just because circumstances are in. This is one thing that I feel. Abraham's faith was not strong enough that he trusted God to deliver him no matter what the circumstance. At the time he did that. But I think it grew from that point. I think he started to realize, as Dwayne said, it cultivated. Judgment of where that was an area between God and Abraham. But let us not forget that God called Abraham his friend and father of the faithful. Okay, now, let's move on.
Well, even Abraham committed sin wouldn't have changed that.
No, it wouldn't change it. Somewhere the
Just
business
like
would have to take
God
place.
called David, you know, a man after his own heart, in spite of, and that was apparently after David's sin.
And that,
So the sin itself did not separate them from God. God forgave them of that sin.
Right,
Because of what they did done.
and whether he said it or not, that's the point. My point is that he grew to be the point man that God would say is father of the faithful.
And David grew.
And David grew. So that part, we have to look at the end result as even how they got there. And it does not, the end result doesn't mean they were perfect in all they did.
And we're the same way. You know, we have hopefully grown in our faith, grown in our belief and trusting in God and that sort of thing. Don't hold me accountable for what I did when I was 19 years old.
Please don't hold me accountable for those 50 years. Now, here's the question. Here's a big one. This is where we'll get to the point that we need to apply. Whatever we determine about Abraham, we can't sit there and use it to benefit us in sin. Okay? Now, James says, therefore, to him who knows to do good and does not do it, to him it is sin. Here's an interesting one. You get pulled over by the police. Do you have to answer the question, do you know when you were speeding? Because the law says you have the right to remain silent. Do you have to answer the question? No. Now say that loud enough that others can hear it.
Should know, but maybe you should.
But no, but should you?
You don't have to tell the policeman yes or no?
You don't have to answer yes or no. All you got to do is say, I have the right not to answer. Everyone has the right not to incriminate themselves. That's why that's built on. You have the right to remain silent. That's part of the Constitution. But now let's me ask you this. How well is it going to go over with the police officer when you exercise that right?
You don't have the right to
Pretty much.
But he wasn't asking that question for information.
No, he was asked that
He
question.
already knew what the answer was.
Yeah, he already knew the answer. He just said, if you're going to admit to it. Do you know? Been there, done that. Okay?
So can you answer back and say, nothing like that, and say, oh, well, how fast was I going?
You can do that. That's a mission of guilt.
No, you just.
You said, how fast was I going? How much was I speeding? I'd like some information here. Was I going as fast as I'd like to be? Okay. Here's the question. Here's what it comes back to. Because here's what we want to get to. Wendy's on the money. He's asked a simple question. My conscience is telling me I ought to answer. And it's telling me not to lie. And sometimes you want to. Here's the big. Now, here. And I hope I didn't want to ask her how much she weighed. Okay? Because my point was just open book. Well, still, it's none of my business. Okay? And it's like the unwritten rule, never ask a woman her age. Okay? Things you do. These are things that won't have to be answered. There's some things that is nobody's business. And there's some things we may not, but can we omit what is actually needful and helpful? Because that's what some of them saying is, well, as long as I tell the part truth, it's still truth. Example I have, Acts 17, 29, 31. Then he called for a light, ran in, fell down trembling before Paul and Silas. I'm talking about the Philippian jailer. And he brought them out and said, sirs, what must I do to be saved? So they said, believe in Jesus Christ and you will be saved, you and your household. How about if I stop there and say, that's all you got to do to be saved? Call upon the name of the Lord. Are the things I'm leaving out that are needful.
Following scriptures.
Huh?
I believe it's the following scriptures.
Oh, that following scripture opens up so much.
If you believe in the Lord Jesus, then you read the scriptures and you know that you need to be baptized.
Okay, but I'm not doing that. Here's the reality of it. This is what we have people do. And they say, well, it's there in the scriptures. Call upon the name of the Lord, you can be saved. And you say this prayer, you'll be saved. And they'll use this as an example. And they'll use the Ethiopian eunuch as an example. But what do they got to do to use them as an example?
Well,
I will admit.
Finish reading the rest of the story. You know, because that's not exactly what those people did. They did more than that.
Well, I understand that. My point is being, and my question is, can you admit what is needful?
No.
See? It doesn't matter how I shape it. Because as we have, as Paul Harvey used to say, the rest of the story. Look, then they spoke the word of the Lord to him, to all who were in his house. And then he took them that same hour of the night and washed their stripes. Immediately he and all his family were baptized. And when he had brought them into his house, he set food before them and rejoiced, having believed in God with all his household. Okay, let's look at some things there. Did the jailer believing on his own save his household?
Each individual member of his household believed.
That's what the verses from 31 to 34 tie in. Okay? Now notice the important part. They spoke the word of the Lord to him, to all who were in his house. Where does it say, just as in Acts chapter 8, that he said, repent, confess, and be baptized?
Obviously he did.
They were pretty much already to the point of repenting and believing.
I mean, he really didn't know a lot.
Their actions demonstrate that.
Here we go. There where the rubber meets the road. Notice that they spoke the word of the Lord to them. We know it included repenting and being baptized and obeying the Lord. All those things are tied in together because of the actions of what they did. They were baptized. And you have no idea how many want to twist this. I've been reading the books, the commentary.
What does wash your stripes mean?
It means there he is talking about, he took Paul and Silas, and where they had been beaten, he cleaned up their wounds. He did that prior to them being baptized. Okay? Now, is there any reason to believe that this baptism was anything other than immersion?
But you might question, where was the water at?
Ray, my buddy. Barnes does that. Albert Barnes in his commentary. And advocating sprinkling, there was not have been enough water in that household to immerse them in that jail. Okay? But what they forget is, guess what? A household was there. The jailer's house, his home, was part of the jail. See, we get people who want to put a spin on it to accept their narrative. So what do? They end up leaving out what is needful.
Paul said in Acts 20 when he was talking to the elders, the Ephesian elders at Miletus, that he said, I'm innocent of all of the blood of all men because I did not hold back from the whole counsel of God. So
The thing of it, and we can get the supplementation from here and from Acts 8, that not only did Paul teach baptism necessary for salvation, Philip taught baptism being necessary for salvation. Because the eunuch asked.
Well, and the implication there too seems to me that is that you don't tell them the whole counsel of God, that you are not in a.
Oh, that's the one in Romans chapter, Acts chapter 20. If you don't tell them the whole counsel of God, guess what? You're putting yourself in jeopardy. And when it comes to plan of salvation, you're going to be held accountable. And it's anything else that's needful. So what it comes down to is, should Abraham have told? Yes.
Yes.
Should he have told? Whether or not where he sinned or not, that's for God to decide. But we know deep in our hearts what we should do. You know, that's what it means in Romans 15:4. The scripture was given for our learning. And there's things we do in our lives that we're not much different from Abraham. Why is these people coming to my house? Maybe they just want some cake and coffee. Right?
I get it.
Huh?
I get it now.
You get it now?
Yeah.
That's not lying.
That must have been a quote from somebody.
It was, but that's not lying. It's true. It's true. I don't think it was a deception. I hope they don't take it that way. I'm going to be honest with you. I said I'm going to stay on fence. I don't think there was any intent in Abraham's heart to deceive Pharaoh or Abimelech. And the reason I say that, because in his mind, Sarah was his sister as well as his wife, and unless he was not directly asked, is she your wife, he didn't lie. And that was his understanding at that time frame. So I just jumped off the fence.
So you're
Now-
saying his fight is between fear and believing God.
His fight between him, and there's a lot of things I can't answer. God let him profit from that. God provided him safety in Gerar through that. Now, whether or not he did sin is between him and God.
Well, and he also had the fear. He had the fear.
Hmm?
He had the fear.
He had the fear.
Because in that time, a king, if he could have whatever he wanted. David had Bathsheba's husband killed so he could have her as his wife. Kings did that all the time. They wanted a woman, they had the husband killed so that they could have the woman.
And that's about 1,000 years down the road.
Yeah, that was 1,000.
So if you think it went on in David's time, think about how well it went on back then.
But did he not also, like, little crazy thing? God used that to come to his heart in the dream to make him turn to God and put his faith in there. And now, who was the plan? There was a plan in there between him and Pharaoh. They humbled themselves. And
Pharaoh and Abimelech both humbled themselves to God.
I mean, they gave up their kingly
So-
power to cower down to what? Cower down.
Now, would they have necessarily done that beforehand? Maybe not.
There was God knew.
But God knows, and that's what it comes back to. So before I harshly judge Abraham, remember God judged me. How many of us ever said, I don't know, when way deep down we knew?
Probably all of us.
Go back to Zoom. One night I was going home.
I kind of think Abraham, who, I guess you that
old enough and wise enough, you probably know better. One night I got pulled over. I'm doing 85 miles an hour. I'm going home. It's 3:30 in the morning. I just got off work. I'm just trying to get home. I gotta be back at work at 2 o'clock the next afternoon. It's a 45-mile drive home. I'm wanting to go to sleep. I've been training this guy as a manager who should have never even been hired as a manager. And I'm frazzled. And I topped that hill on Interstate 4, right there at Lake Mary, and in the dark, right over there, said 2 Seminole County deputies. As soon as I hit them, I seen their lights come on. And I just pulled over on the side of the road and waited. Next thing I know, I got 6 of them around me. Must have been a really slow night. Well, they had a really bad desk problem. The guy comes up, he don't ask me if I know how fast I'm going. He don't ask me if I know my speed or not. He said, do you know what the speed limit is right here? He's already got my license. And I'm sitting there real quick now thinking, what am I going to tell him? No, he knows I just live about 10 miles up the road. I travel this all the time. Yeah. I said, it's 55 out here. It's going to turn 60 after I go over the bridge into Volusia County. Do you have a good reason for going as fast as you're going? I looked him dead in the eye and that flashlight shining on me, and I said, I'm tired. I said, did you ever have to train a rookie that you would just wish they'd just fire? He goes, yeah. So I explained to him what was going on. I explained what was going on. He looked back there and he goes, did you run out of gas today? Because I got a gas can right behind the seat. I said, yeah. I said, I threw that gas into the tank just so I could get to a gas station and go on to work this afternoon. He goes, you sit right there. And I'm sitting there thinking, I got cops everywhere. Where am I going to go? That's a little 4-banger. It'll take me over the bridge to get up 85-4 again. Huh? No. He comes back and ran my license. He says, Mr. Woodard, you think you can keep it under the speed limit? Can you get over that bridge? That's exactly what he said. Can you get over that bridge? Yes, sir. He says, I hope you have a better day. And I was gone, and I did 55 till I got that 65 speed limit. And for the next 2 miles on the interstate, I'm going to be honest, I was doing 70. But I was not doing 85. Comes back to what you said. You think you ought to answer? It's always better to give the truth. Always better to answer things truthfully. It may not get you out of the ticket, but it'll definitely keep your name right. Let's sing our song invitation.
Hear the sweet voice of Jesus say, come unto me, I am the way. Hearken the loving call away. Come for he loves you so. Only a step, only a step. Come for he bled for you and I. He's the same loving Savior yet. Jesus the crucified. Casting your heavy burden down, come to the cross, the world may frown, you shall wear a glorious crown when he makes of his own. Only a step, only a step, the Lord he bled for you and I. The same loving Savior yet, Jesus the crucified. Open for you the pearly gate, that once for you, now watch and wait. Terrible thought to cry too late, Jesus I come to thee. Only a step, only a step, come for he bled for you and I. He's the same loving Savior yet, Jesus the crucified.
Thank you all for listening. Thank you for being here. Brother Ed, would you dismiss us, please?
Our Father and our God, we're so thankful for this chance we have to come to you, to worship you, to bow down to you, to praise your name. We thank you for the opportunity to learn about you and your will for us, to examine more deeply what it means to commit sin and to avoid it. Help us to always examine what we do with that fact. Father, we thank you for your Son and his love for us, who brought us here, made it possible